You probably think anger happens because of other people. Someone says the wrong thing. Someone disrespects you. Someone crosses a line, and suddenly, you lose control. But here's the strange part. Most emotions inside the body only last about 90 seconds. 90 seconds. After that, the chemistry fades, which means something uncomfortable is also true. If you're still angry 5 minutes later, 10 minutes later, or even hours later, it's no longer the emotion. It's the story. The mind replaying the moment again, and again, and again. Not because the situation is still happening, but because the brain keeps feeding it. And once you see this, something important becomes clear. The real problem isn't anger. The real problem is that most people have no system between the trigger and the reaction. Look closely at how most emotional reactions actually happen. You sit down to work. You open your laptop. You're already a little tired. Then something small happens. A message that sounds slightly rude. A comment that feels dismissive. Someone ignores what you said in a meeting. Nothing dramatic. But inside the body, the signal begins. Your chest tightens. Your breathing changes. Your brain switches into threat detection. Adrenaline, cortisol, a quick chemical alarm. And before you even notice it, the mind starts building a story. They don't respect me. They always do this. Why does this keep happening? The body reacts once, but the mind repeats it. And that's where most people get trapped. They think they're feeling the emotion. In reality, they're replaying the narrative. The brain doesn't just react to reality. It reacts to what you keep thinking about. So, every time the mind replays the moment, the body receives another wave of the same chemistry, which means the anger isn't lasting longer. You're just restarting it. Again, and again, and again, and without realizing it, you've built a loop. Trigger, story, reaction. The problem isn't weak discipline. The problem is that most people never learn how to interrupt the loop. The shift usually begins with a small realization. Emotions arrive automatically. Reactions do not. When something triggers you, the body reacts first. A chemical signal. A quick surge of adrenaline. Your nervous system preparing for threat. That part is not a choice. But what happens next is, because between the trigger and the reaction, there is a small gap. Most people never notice it. Everything happens too quickly. The comment lands. The emotion rises. The reaction explodes. But when you begin paying attention, you start to see something different. There is a moment, a very short moment, where the emotion exists, but the reaction hasn't happened yet. And that moment is where self-control lives. Not in suppressing emotions, not in pretending you feel nothing, but in observing what is happening before you act on it. You notice the heat rising in your chest. You notice the mind starting to form a story. And instead of becoming the story, you watch it. That single shift changes everything. Because once you see the process, you realize anger isn't just a feeling. It's a loop. Body reacts. Mind explains. Story repeats. Break the story. And the emotion loses most of its fuel. Trying to stay calm rarely works. In the moment, emotions move faster than willpower. So instead of relying on discipline, it helps to have a simple system, something small enough to use in real life. 3 steps. First, notice the signal. Emotions always appear in the body before they appear in words. A tight jaw, faster breathing, a sudden heat in your chest. Most people only notice anger once it becomes an argument. But if you catch the physical signal early, you interrupt the automatic reaction. You move from unconscious reaction to awareness. Second, create a pause, not a long meditation. Just 10 seconds, a slow breath, silence instead of replying immediately, looking away from the screen before typing a response. This pause does something important in the brain. It gives the rational part of your mind time to come back online. Without the pause, Instinct drives the reaction. With the pause. Choice returns. Third. Question the story. Every emotional reaction is supported by a narrative. They're disrespecting me. They're trying to make me look bad. They never listen. But most of the time, the story is only one possible interpretation. So instead of believing the first version your mind creates, ask a quieter question. What else could this mean? Maybe they're distracted. Maybe they misunderstood. Maybe nothing personal was intended. At all. The goal isn't to excuse bad behavior. The goal is to stop the mind from turning a small trigger into a full emotional storm. Notice the signal. Pause. Question the story. 3. Small steps. Simple enough to practice today, but powerful enough to slowly rewire how you react to the world. At first, this system feels almost too simple. You still feel the irritation. You still notice the tension. The trigger still appears, but something subtle begins to change. The reaction doesn't happen as fast. You pause more often. Arguments end earlier. Small situations stop following you for the rest of the day. Not because life suddenly becomes easier, but because your mind stops adding fuel to every spark. Over time, the brain learns the new pattern. Trigger, pause, observation, choice, and the emotional wave that once lasted hours now fades much faster. You spend less time replaying conversations in your head, less time proving something to people who weren't thinking about you anymore, less time draining your energy on things that disappear in a few minutes. This is the quiet benefit of emotional systems. They don't make you perfect. They just reduce the damage caused by impulsive reactions. And slowly, the result compounds. You become easier to work with, easier to trust, easier to stay calm under pressure. Not because you force yourself to be calm, but because you built a structure that makes calm the default. Consistency matters more than intensity. Here, a small pause repeated every day changes far more than one moment of perfect self-control. Most people spend their lives trying to control what others say, what others do, how others treat them. But the real leverage is somewhere else. In the small space between what happens and how you respond. That space is easy to miss. It's quiet. Sometimes it lasts only a few seconds, but inside that pause, something important becomes possible. Choice. You don't need to eliminate anger. You don't need perfect emotional control. You only need to notice the moment before the reaction begins. Because once you see that moment, you stop being dragged by every trigger. You begin responding instead of reacting. And over time, something interesting happens. The things that used to control your mood lose their influence, not because the world changed, but because your internal system did. You don't need to become a completely different person. You just need a better system between the trigger and the reaction. If you've ever noticed yourself stuck in the same emotional loop, comment system below. And if you want to keep improving how your mind works each week, subscribe. Each video, we build one small system that makes life a little clearer and a little more under your control.